Often we start to wonder if we're just lazy or broken, if we have brain fog and fatigue, but every time we check labs, they seem to come back normal. This session that we have for you is for you. My name is Dr. Kira Wada. I am a quadruple board certified allergy, immunology, and lifestyle medicine physician, and I also live with an autoimmune disease called Sjögren's. This talk comes from our 5th annual virtual Sjögren Summit, and I call it Calming the Immune Storm, because the reality is that you are not lazy and you are not broken. And even though your labs look normal, your symptoms are very real. So much of what you are feeling is driven by a nervous system that has gotten stuck holding down the alarm bell. And in this session, we're going to talk about the vagus nerve, your body's built-in calming brake, how doing slow exhale breathing can help engage it, and other small daily signals of safety that can over time turn down the storm. Your nervous system changes through repetition and safety rather than intensity. If this helps you, I'd love for you to subscribe. Check out the description below for more resources, but in the meantime, let's dive in. Welcome everyone to Calming the Immune Storm, how your nervous system drives Sjögren's symptoms. Before we begin, my general disclaimer, everything I share today is meant to educate and to strengthen conversations you have with your own care team. None of these talks can replace individual medical advice for your situation. So as we go, please bring whatever resonates with you during these sessions to the people who help manage your health. I would love to start by picturing 2 women, and frankly, these can be 2 gentlemen too, in 2 exam rooms right next to each other. It's the same morning in clinic, and their lab reports are nearly identical. They have the same antibody patterns. Their inflammatory markers are the same. And yet, when the doc goes in to talk to each of them and ask how they feel, we hear 2 completely different stories. Now, if you live with Sjögren's disease or you care for someone who has Sjögren's disease, you suspect you have Sjögren's disease, you may know this very well from the inside, because this can happen in a single individual in the same week, have the same labs, and feel like you show up as 2 different people. And for a long time, medicine really has had nothing to say about that gap. Frankly, I don't remember learning anything about that in my training, but we have some more understanding of what's going on, and we're going to talk about that this morning. The idea I would love for you to carry through this talk is that your symptoms are real, even when the labs look normal, and they are not as random as they may seem. Often they are pattern responses that are related to wiring that has been working behind the scenes really hard to try to keep you safe. Once you're able to see things from that perspective, it helps shift ourselves back into the driver's seat. And admittedly, that is not necessarily magic. And also, having that agency restored, having that ability to see that we have a little bit more control also can be quite powerful. And so I would love for you to offer me a little bit of a benefit of the doubt in that, we're going to talk about some things that can get us a little prickly sometimes. So stay with me. All right. The other personal disclosure, right? I am both a physician and a patient, and I cannot separate one from the other. Now, I try to do that from time to time and lean more into my physician perspective, lean more into my patient perspective. But at the end of the day, I am both, and I can't separate those 2 experiences. And so I think that, is an important note to just put out there, because each of us has a different set of lenses that we look through, and that informs how we see our world. All right. So where are we going with this? First, we're going to talk a little bit about the science of the nervous system, our brain, our nerves, and our immune system, how those parts of our body are communicating with one another. We're going to talk about 3 dials that we might be actually able to reach to modulate this aspect of our physiology, to downregulate or turn down the dial. And finally, we're going to talk about how to make this work in real life, because that's the hard part. We're all human, and humans are very human, and making changes in how we show up and the behaviors we take on, that's where the rubber meets the road. And that's where most of us, including myself, often may get stuck. There is a field called psychoneuroimmunology. It is a long word, and frankly, it's missing a couple pieces that we'll talk about, but it is really trying to encompass a simple idea that there is this constant conversation between your brain, your nerves, your hormones, which is the word that's missing, and your immune system. And for a very long time, these were taught as separate departments. And frankly, clinically, as we try to go get help from the medical system, they still are treated very often as separate visits, right? You may go see your therapist or your psychiatrist or your primary care, right? If you're feeling sad or anxious or what have you, right? You may see your neurologist if you are dealing with other kind of neurologic symptoms related to the brain or the peripheral or the other nerves, right? You may see an endocrinologist or your primary care doc or your OBGYN for hormone issues. And then for your immune system, you may see an allergist immunologist or a rheumatologist perhaps, right? All kind of in their little piecemeal section. But the reality is that these are all interconnected and they're talking to each other in these feedback loops, both directions, multi-directional, all day, every day, while we're awake, while we're asleep. It never stops. We're going to talk about 3 things that are happening in this conversation. We need to simplify this a little bit because the reality is that this is very complex physiology and we only have about 25 minutes. So bear with me. But our body comes with a built-in calming brake. And in Sjögren's disease, that brake tends to be a bit weaker than it should be. This is the case in kind of across autoimmune and chronic inflammatory conditions. The brake runs largely through a nerve you very likely have heard of, the vagus nerve. It is the main nerve of what we call the rest and digest or parasympathetic state. Most people think of it as something to do with digestion or heart rate. Maybe you've heard of heart rate variability, and it does both of those things and more. It also does something less famous, but more important for us. It carries anti-inflammatory signals. When the vagus nerve is doing its job well, it actively helps your body quiet inflammation from the inside. The research in Sjögren's disease shows that this calming pathway is often impaired, meaning our foot is on the brake a bit softer than it should be. So the body stays in a more revved up state, and that inflammation runs with less of a check on it. The checks and balances are off. So I want you to hold on to that picture of your foot just partially on the brake, because nearly everything in this talk that we're talking about is a way of trying to push on it and to put a little more pressure on that brake. The second thing is that this is a two-way street, and that matters how you understand your own bad days. A nervous system that is stuck on high alert keeps signaling the immune system to stay switched on, and the immune system answers back. The inflammatory messengers it produces, called cytokines, travel all around the body and act on the brain and the nerves themselves. So when people told you that the fatigue or the brain fog was all in your head, they may have intended to kind of brush it off, but the truth is more literal than that and far more validating. Inflammation genuinely reaches the brain tissue, the nerve tissue, and it changes how we think and feel. Your fatigue has a physical source, and your brain fog has a physical source. You have not been imagining all of that heaviness. The third thing is the part that I want you to hear the most. So I'm going to slow down a little bit more. I know I get told fairly often I need to slow my roll when I'm talking. What researchers actually measure, and when they measure nervous system function in people with Sjögren's disease, they find signs of dysregulated, overworked nervous system show up in a large share of patients. The more dysregulated it is, the heavier the symptom load tends to be. Now, here's the piece that often can reframe a lot of this. The amount of visible damage to your glands does not reliably predict how you feel. You can have relatively modest damage on paper or on the ultrasound scans and feel genuinely pretty awful. The variable that often explains that gap is the state of our nervous system. And these nervous system symptoms are real enough to affect whether people are able to keep working, even when the standard tests we run typically don't measure them at all. I want you to sit with that for a moment because I'd like to think it's the most important thing I may say today. If you have spent years feeling like your experiences did not match your test results and feeling unmeasured and unseen because of it, this is the reason. You were not exaggerating. The system that was driving so much of how you felt was simply not being looked at. You deserve to be seen, to be heard, and believed. And the science is finally catching up to what your body has been telling you this whole time. So when the title of this talk says calming the immune storm, here's what I mean by it. When we help our nervous system come down off of high alert and feel safe enough to rest, we are doing something physical. We are working directly on the chemistry that calms immune overreactivity. I want you to picture an immune system that has become too quick to sound the alarm, and a nervous system that has gotten stuck holding the alarm button down. The nervous system is one of the very few places in this whole disease where we have real daily leverage on that alarm. I also want to be very careful and honest with you because you deserve that. None of this means your nervous system caused your Sjögren's disease. And it does not mean that calming your nervous system is a cure or that it replaces your medical care. There is no single switch or supplement that turns this disease off that we've found yet. And anyone promising that is not being straight with you. What science is showing, though, is that the nervous system is a powerful dial, one that shapes how we feel day to day, and it is a dial we can learn to reach and to modify with practice. This is one weather system inside a larger picture we'll come back to later in the summit. But for today, let's just stay with this one because this is the one that we're talking about today and it's within our reach. So I find this helpful to think of in terms of dials. I go back to thinking about my dad had this like stereo equipment that he was so excited to get back in probably the mid 90s, and it had all these dials. And that's what I visualize when I think about this. The treble and the bass and the balance, and I don't know what all those dials are about. But we're going to focus on 3 because 3 is a number that frankly we can hold in our head, and it's about our limits that we can access, especially on hard days. Each of these dials is a different way of sending your nervous system the same underlying message, which is this: you are safe enough now. You are allowed to come down off high alert. Everything I'm about to describe is an example meant to give you the feeling of that. And the rest of the summit will take these ideas deeper with other experts in these areas. And anything you decide to try is worth running past your own care team first. The first dial is perceived safety, and this is how safe your nervous system reads your world to be from moment to moment. It is shaped by the very real things in your physical environment, your relationships, your history. So many of us carry medical trauma or other traumas, big and little t, from over the years. We know that there is an increased risk of chronic inflammatory diseases like Sjögren's if we have a history of adverse childhood events. Years of being doubted, dismissed, or sent away with just eye drops and a shrug. That is a trauma for many of us. That history does not live in your memory. It also lives in your nervous system, which stays braced for the next time that you will not be believed. Naming that is part of this work, because your system has been bracing for a reason. It is not irrational. A simple example of turning this dial is giving yourself permission to be selective about what and who you spend your limited energy around, and to take a step back from the people and spaces that keep you quietly on guard. That permission is a legitimate way to lower the background level of threat your body is responding to all day long. The second dial is physiologic safety. This one is about speaking to your nervous system in its own language, which is the language of the body rather than words. Your most direct line to calming that break that we talked about is your breath. When you exhale, and that exhale is slower and longer than your inhale, it gently engages the vagus pathway and signals to your body that the emergency has passed. You do not need a special technique or an app or a perfect daily routine for this to count. A few slow, comfortable breaths taken over the course of the day is an example of giving that break a small, repeated squeeze. Sleep works on the same dial, and so does a gentle, predictable daily rhythm. The theme here are small signals sent often with gentleness in place of one heroic effort that is not sustainable. The third dial is one that people tend to underestimate, and it is the story that we tell ourselves about our symptoms. Let me explain why this is real biology and not a motivational slogan. The meaning our nervous system assigns to sensations actually changes the physical response it mounts. If a wave of fatigue rolls in and the story running underneath it is, "This is it, I'm getting worse, and this will never end," your system reads genuine danger and turns the threat response up, which can make the wave bigger. If that story can soften into, "This is a flare, I have moved through these before, and I know a few things that help me," then that very same sensation carries less alarm, and your body has room to respond a bit differently. I want to be very clear about what I'm saying. Your symptoms are absolutely real, and no one is asking you to think positive and pretend you feel fine. The work here is simple and gentle. It is working on keeping fear from stacking a second layer of alarm on top of a moment that is already hard. A small example is to notice the story you're telling yourself in a rough moment, to have that pause, and to add one quiet word to it. And this is hard, and it has passed before. That one small word keeps the door open that fear tends to slam shut. Notice what each of these 3 dials share. Each one of them hands you back a voice, a choice, and a measure of agency in an experience that has probably felt completely out of your control. I know that's how I've felt most of the way, especially early in my diagnosis and trying to figure out what the heck I was doing. That's the heart of it. And you're learning to work with your own biology, and that is a real and steadying form of power in a disease that works hard to take your power away from you. I have watched many people get the next part wrong, myself included, so let me try to save you a bit of heartache. The moment we learn that the nervous system matters, the temptation is to run out and collect all the tools. A breathing app for 3 days, a supplement a friend swore that changed her life, a new gadget that promises to reset everything. We throw ourselves at each one for a little while, and when we don't feel transformed by the end of the week, we quit and we quietly conclude that this nervous system business it doesn't work for people like us. I have been there more than once. So here's what's actually going on. Your nervous system does not change in response to intensity. It changes through repetition and safety, gently and over time. It learns the way we would calm a skittish animal by showing up again and again and again and proving in small ways that it is safe to come down. One dramatic session does very little on its own, but small, consistent signals sent often and continued over weeks are what gradually retrain the system. That is simply how the biology works, and it says nothing about your discipline or your worth. So the shift I want for you to take away from this, rather than chasing a pile of random tricks, and really move towards one small, steady practice that you can continue to keep up with support around you so that you are not doing it alone and judging yourself the moment a hard week arrives. What actually moves the needle is consistency and gentleness. The same small signals repeated along with the company of people who understand what you are carrying. The last part matters more than it sounds. For most of us, the difference between a practice we keep and one we abandon comes down to whether we felt alone while doing it. And that is a thread we're going to carry through the rest of the summit. So let me bring this home. For a long time, the story we were told about Sjögren's disease was that it was about dryness and that you can manage it from the outside with drops and saliva substitutes and not much more. The new era we are stepping into offers a fuller and far more hopeful story. Your symptoms are connected to one another. Your nervous system is a real and central character in how you feel, and you have genuine daily leverage over your own experience, working alongside your medical care and your care team as an addition to everything you do. That is what it looks like to begin calming the immune storm from the inside. You may have walked in today carrying the belief that how you feel is simply something that happens to you with no say of your own. And I hope you're leaving with a different sense, that you have more influence than you were ever told. And this influence is something that we can quietly practice day by day without placing blame on ourselves. I think that is also the key. I really want to thank you for joining me this morning. Your symptoms have always been real, and you have always deserved to be seen, to be heard, and to be believed. The hopeful news science is handing us is that the storm is not nearly as far beyond our reach as it has felt for so long. So let's keep going stronger together.